Welcome. Thank you for joining us for our webinar, Negotiation Strategies, Capitalizing on Your Gender Advantage by Carlson Executive Education. We are pleased that you've chosen to spend your time learning about steps women can take to improve their success with negotiation. We'll start out today with introducing you to our faculty speaker, Pri Shah. Professor Shah will share insights on harnessing the strengths women bring to the negotiating table, after which she will take questions. Please use the chat function on the webinar to submit your questions. To do this, click on the black bar at the bottom of the window to pull up the menu bar. Before we get started on the program, I would like to share a brief overview of Carlson Executive Education for those who may be new to us. Carlson Executive Education is a part of the Carlson School of Management at the University of Minnesota. For over 50 years, top business leaders at organizations ranging from small independent firms to Fortune 500 companies have partnered with Carlson Executive Education for cutting-edge insights and essential leadership development. And those insights come from our fantastic Carlson School of Management faculty, who we have the pleasure to hear from today. Pri Shah, PhD, is an associate professor in the Department of Work and Organizations at the Carlson School of Management, University of Minnesota. Her primary research areas are social networks, teams, and decision-making. And now we will hear from Professor Shah on negotiation strategies, capitalizing on your gender advantage.
Well, welcome. My name is Professor Shah, and I'm excited to bring together a new offering of negotiations, capitalizing on the gender advantage. So what I'd like to do today is give you an overview of the key things that we're going to be covering in the session and the reasons why these skills are important. So the first thing I want to do is recast our session, not so much as what women do poorly in the negotiation, but change it to focus on the key skills that women bring to the negotiation. So what do women have? What do they do inherently that can help them capitalize in the negotiation context? So what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at harnessing the strengths that women bring to the table, and participants are going to learn how to frame the negotiation into a mutual problem-solving exercise as opposed to a negotiation. So it's not kind of a negotiation where it's a win-lose context, but rather people are working together to come up with a mutually beneficial solution. The next thing we're going to be doing is harnessing some skills that you need to do well in the negotiation. By that, I mean learning how to prepare and plan appropriately in the negotiation context, learning how to value the skills that you bring to the table, and also engaging in an experiential exercise so you can practice some of these skills that we're going to be learning about in the negotiation context. So the focus specifically in this seminar is going to be trying to figure out the best way to come to a win-win solution where both parties are doing well, where both parties are happy with the outcome. And we find that women really excel in these mutually beneficial solutions. In terms of the key learning objectives that we're going to be focusing on, the first is to dissect the strengths that women actually bring to the table. So what is it that we do naturally that work inherently well within the negotiation context? Once we figure that out, we're going to be focusing on how do you plan and prepare for the negotiation. In particular, plan and prepare so you're prepared for all sides of the negotiation. Then we'll engage in role play and practice some of our both integrative, expand the pie skills, and distributive, divide the pie skills. So we're going to make sure that we not only expand the pie, but we get our fair share of the pie. And then last, we're going to be looking at how do you analyze the behaviors and motives of the other party so that you can become a better negotiator. So first thing we're going to be looking at are the skills that women bring to the table that inherently make them good negotiators. So women by their very nature tend to be very communally oriented. And what that means is they're very concerned for the other people around them. They tend to be very collaborative, especially in problem-solving activities. They tend to want to hear about other people's viewpoints and create solutions that work for everybody, not just enforce their own or impose their own ideas on others. So by this, they have really great listening skills. They're really good and attuned to understanding what folks are saying, which adds to the empathetic skills as well. As a bonus, they tend to be very much more ethical in the negotiation context than men. So all told, these are excellent skills to bring into a negotiation context. especially if we recast the negotiation, not just as something that occurs in isolation. It's not a one-shot transaction. It's not buying a used car, but a negotiation is in effect a relationship building activity that you're conducting with another individual on behalf of your firm and their firm. So you're building a relationship with another firm, and women are really good at this particular activity. This is something that takes trust, mutual commitment, understanding, and listening to the other party's key objectives. So just some examples of how women negotiate or when they negotiate well. Just think back to our last two government shutdowns. We had one in 2013, and we just recently had a government shutdown that lasted the longest it's ever lasted. Key to resolving these government shutdowns were female senators. There were female senators who worked together across both sides of the aisles to come up with solutions that would work for everybody. So one of the reasons the female senators were instrumental in this particular context is they tend to have far less egos than their male counterparts. They don't care whose idea it is. They're really focused on making sure that the best idea gets there. The second is they don't need to win at all costs. They don't need to trounce their opponents. They don't need to drag them through the mud. What they need is they need to make sure they can work with somebody else in the future. And they're really careful and respectful of how they interact with each other. The third is women, yes, they're interested in their own ideas, but they're also interested in bouncing off these ideas with other people. So they're interested in melding their ideas with others to come up with an even better idea, as opposed to imposing what their views are on other people. Yeah. Fourth, for women, compromise is not a bad word. It's okay to compromise. It's a necessary component of business, and most definitely a necessary component of working in government. And the last is, for the most part, these women have pre-existing relationships. They started off as a minority. They're still a minority within the Senate, within the House, but they socialize pretty regularly together. They have dinners together. They know each other. They know each other's children. They have strong pre-existing relationships that provide a foundation for them to be able to work across the aisle. So let's go back to why it's important to negotiate. The next two slides give you data from the Census Bureau from 2017. And this first slide talks about the gap that exists between men and women in terms of their salary. Early on, this gap might just be a few $1,000s attributed to the initial starting salary difference between men and women. But as the years go on, the thousands of dollars becomes tens of thousands and hundreds and thousands of dollars. So there's a huge cost for women for not engaging in that preliminary negotiation and not engaging in negotiations over time. And this slide from the Census Bureau tells you the amount that women make compared to women. So if we benchmark against white men at our 100%, we see that Asian women are doing well. They're making about 97%, so still less than 100, but about 97. White women are making about 80%. So for every dollar a man would come in or make, a woman is making 80 cents on that dollar. And it goes downhill from there. So African American women make 67% of what white men make, and Latin American women, Hispanic women are making about 58%. Yeah. So what you can see is that there's a real need to understand how to negotiate and cultivate these skills for women. So first, let's talk about what causes the gap, and then a few things about how to rectify the gap. So one of the things that causes the gap early on in the literature is we learned that women tend to negotiate less than men, that women just don't seem to recognize situations as negotiable as often as men seem to recognize situations as negotiable. So understanding that they can evoke the negotiation schema at all is important for women. The second is negative stereotypes of women when they do engage in negotiations. So when they negotiate, depending on how they negotiate, sometimes they're seen as aggressive or bossy, and others might not want to work with them. So women are not only aware of, but very sensitive to these stereotypes and careful in terms of how they're engaging in the negotiations. Men can have the same exact behavior, but they're not prone to these negative stereotypes that women are prone to. The third thing is that women often tend to devalue their skills. We often do so much within the organization that we don't even keep track of. It's like we're giving away our value or our skills. So keeping track and understanding the real value, the core value of the skills and what we bring to the organization is important. The fourth is a lack of awareness or maybe pursuit of alternative options. We don't seek out alternative job options as often as, let's say, men do. So we tend to be a little bit more complacent with where we are at. And the last, to no fault of our own, we're often deceived, much more often than men are deceived. others find it easier to deceive women than men. So knowing how to keep track of those signs is important. So ways to rectify the gap. The first and most important is recognizing situations as negotiable. When we recognize a situation as negotiable, women actually do quite well in the negotiation. They're able to evoke the negotiation schema and the skills that they inherently have and engage in the negotiation they need to. But first, they need to recognize that a situation is negotiable. The second is, rather than thinking about a negotiation as a one-shot transaction that occurs in isolation, recasting, reframing that negotiation as a problem-solving activity, so something they can work with somebody else towards. So even recasting it changes their perspective on the negotiation. The third is not only preparing for the negotiation and understanding, what the parameters are, but really preparing for the negotiation in terms of knowing what you are worth. What is your market value? What do you bring to the organization? What are the unique skills that your employer cannot replace without having you there? So knowing what you're worth is very important. And the last is they find that women actually do better, not when they're negotiating for themselves, but they do much better when they're negotiating on behalf of another party, whether it be their team or their department or their organization. Not only that, women are perceived differently when they negotiate on behalf of another party as opposed to themselves. So the more that you can cast a negotiation as not something for yourself, but something that's needed for your team, your department, or other larger entity, the better off you are in the negotiation, even if it is a job or salary negotiation. Why do you need this amount, or why do you need these resources in terms of benefiting the team to move forward in your organization? So this is just a snippet of things we're going to be covering in our context, our negotiation context. We'll go into much more details in terms of the planning and preparation and actually engaging in the exercise later on. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Professor Shah. Before we get into questions, I want everyone to know about our upcoming 3-day Women in Leadership, Inspire, Influence, and Impact program at the Carlson School of Management in Minneapolis. Hear perspectives and gain critical insights from women executives who have persevered and have achieved significant levels of success. Participants in this program will also learn communication tools, more negotiation strategies, and gain valuable insight about their own working styles, including when and how to flex their strengths to become even more effective leaders. You can learn more about the program and register at our website at z.umn.edu/womeninleadership. Now we'll get into some questions. Pri, what is one of the biggest misconceptions around women and negotiations?
I think the biggest misconception is that women don't have the skills to negotiate. And I think it's completely wrong. For my 20 plus years teaching negotiations, what I find is the best students in my class tend to be women. They tend to get the best outcomes in the class, and they also tend to be much more reflective of how they did in the negotiation, how their behaviors came across for their other partners. So people tend to appreciate negotiating with them much more. So I think women have the skills. It's just being able to evoke a negotiation schema so they know that they can and should use those skills.
Thank you. Thank you all for attending, and thank you, Pri, for your insights. This content will be shared on Carlson Executive Education's LinkedIn page, so you can find it there to share it with your network and follow us for more great business insights. We hope to see you here for the 3-day program, Women in Leadership, this May.